Hello and welcome to the 30k channel, the game of Titanic battles and the Horus Heresy. I'm your host James and I'm back with Boris for another game of Adeptus Titanicus. So what have we got in store for us today, Boris?
So this is our second game in our linked series of 4 games, the Siege of Rhodax. So we played our first scenario last month. It went to Policiates as the winners, but this is game number 2 and we're up to 1,250 points now. We've both added forces, which is pretty great. So what happened in our last game?
So last game saw Policiates attempting to escape an ambush put forward by Legio Noctilus, barely escaping with the skin of their teeth. It was an exceptionally close game. Came down to 2 dice rolls at the end,
yes,
with engines at the furthest points on their reactor levels. All sorts of tense, dramatic elements happened. You should watch it if you haven't already.
Yes.
However, now Policiates are back. So what's this next scenario about?
So now Policiates are on the attack. They're attacking a Noctilus base. We're trying to clear out and get out of there before we're discovered. We're in this sort of wastes and depression outside of the main fortress. We've set up a small secret base. The main fortress, which again, if you watch the intro for the first game, if you haven't watched it, go back now. The traitors are conducting warp shenanigans to crack open the Eldar vaults and recover the artifact. This is causing earthquakes across the planet, and it's revealed one of the earthquakes has revealed the Noctilus base, so Policiates can attack them. We're borrowing or using a mission from Titan Death. It's the Edge of the Void, so it's a deployment where Policiates surround the Noctilus deployment. Your objective is to seize the center of the board, so for every Titan scale, you get victory points equal to Titan scales in the middle of the board. At the end of the game, it's 5 battle rounds. I get victory points equal to the scale of destroyed Titans, and my secondary is to damage your Titans. We both have some stratagems. You get an extra one because you won the last game. So I have a couple of defensive stratagems to represent the base defenses. They're sort of mines and guns. And yours are?
I've got static rain to bring down some shields, maybe get some engine kills, and quake barrage to represent some off-map artillery.
Yes, one of your Nemesis Titans firing from outside of the map.
I hope they are released soon.
Yes. So the Loyalists get an extra victory point for winning last game. Other than that, it's going to be a fairly straight-up slugfest. Yours are quite close range, which I'm a bit worried about, especially considering, so to represent the earthquakes going on and the release of the radioactive dust and such, we're using another rule from Titan Death to represent the sort of fields of dust. So every strategy phase, our range, maximum range is going to be 2d10 plus a Titan scale, and that's the number of inches we can fire. So this is going to get up close and ugly really fast, which my Legio are not quite as good at, and yours are, and also outfitted to do.
Yes.
So
yes, there's some nasty tricks.
We will see. We will see. But yes, so we both added forces. So what have you added?
So Policiates have got 2 additional Reavers to the fight, including a warp missile and a Vulcan Megabottle Carapace, some newish weapons to see what they can do in this game. What about yourself?
So I have added, Noctilus have added a extra Reaver Titan, and we've added some different weapons. We have one of most weapons now, sort of mixed and matched between the Titans. Other than that, it's the 2 Warhounds and the Reaver and the Acastus again, I'm afraid. But yes, that's other than that. So I think that's pretty much everything.
Yeah, so we've talked through our forces and a bit about the scenarios, so let's go right into the detail of the lists, and we'll see you in a second.
1,250 points of Legio Noctilus supported by Knights from House Niagma in an Axiom Maniple. Legio Noctilus are able to field an Axiom Maniple by using their Legio trait to swap out any mandatory Titan in a Maniple for their choice using a Warhound Titan. In this case, they have used a Warhound to swap out for the Axiom Maniple's mandatory Warlord Titan, able to field 2 Warhounds and a Reaver. Leading Legio Noctilus is a Princeps Senuris in a Reaver Titan Typhoon, armed with a Volcano Cannon, a Gatling Blaster, and an Apocalypse Missile Launcher. The Princeps Senuris trait is Dominant Strategist, which allows them once per battle to seize the Opus Titanica and become the first player that round. The Princeps Senuris has taken advantage of the Legio-specific war gear and is equipped with ranging auspexes for 10 points, which allow pre-measuring of distance before firing, and has also taken blind missiles on their Apocalypse missile launcher, which allows them once per game to fire a line-of-sight blocking barrage. Joining the Axiom Maniple as an additional Reaver, Scourge is equipped with a laser blaster, a carapace-mounted turbo laser destructor, and a melter cannon. Scourge has also taken ranging auspexes. Finishing out the Axiom Maniple are 2 Warhounds, Chieftain and Cavalier. One is armed with a turbo laser destructor and a plasma blast gun. The other is armed with a Vulcan megabolter and a plasma blast gun. Both have taken ranging auspexes as per their Legio trait. Finishing off the force is a single Acastus Knight from House Niagma, armed with a twin Magna las cannon, an Ironstorm missile pod, and a twin hull-mounted las cannon.
1,250 points of Legio Policiates in a Corsair Maniple, supported by a banner of Knight Lancers from House Peltasti. Legio-specific wargear for Policiates includes ablative ceramite plating, which allows a Titan to ignore bonuses to attacker's armor roll as a result of damage already inflicted on the chosen location, and armor spikes, which increase the number of dice it generates when making a smash attack from D3 to D6. Leading the Corsair Maniple is the Reaver Titan Heloplius, led by Princeps Demetrius. It is armed with a melter cannon, a chain fist, and a carapace turbo laser. Additionally, it has the upgrade ablative armor plating on its torso and armor spikes as well. The Princeps Sonorus has the warlord trait Will of Iron, which means in the first time it takes catastrophic damage, it can potentially ignore the result. Next in the Maniple is the Reaver Titan Ballistae Magna, armed with 2 volcano cannons and a carapace-mounted warp missile. It has also been upgraded to have ablative armor on its carapace and armor spikes as well. Rounding off the Corsair Maniple is the Reaver Titan Scorpius, armed with a melter cannon and a chain fist, and a carapace-mounted Vulcan megabolter. It also has armor spikes and ablative armor on its legs. Supporting the Corsair Maniple is a pair of Knight Lancers from House Peltasti. Both legions deployed, with Policiates surrounding Noctilus. Policiates' primary goal is to get to the centre of the board, but there's a whole lot of traitor engines in the way.
Yes, Noctilus are already feeling pretty surrounded. I'm anticipating turn 1 charges, which are going to be really unpleasant. There are some defensive bunkers on the board, which could help Noctilus out. One thing we did forget to mention is there are 5 bunkers on the board. Together they count as one Apocalypse missile launcher stratagem. So 5 shots. However, whenever one bunker is destroyed, it goes down by 1. So if there's 4 bunkers left, there's only 4 shots left, etc. And they count towards secondaries for Policiates.
Yep, so an additional objective for Policiates is to destroy all the ground assets. Choosing between them and the Titans would be hard, but after all, Policiates is there to destroy ground targets, not engines.
Yes, we'll see what happens. So there's no roll-off?
There's no roll-off. Policiates take the first turn, so good luck, and we'll see you in the first turn. Policiates turn 1 strategy phase. The Titans of the Corsair Maniple elected not to use any orders to keep up their flexibility for the rest of the turn. However, the Cerastus Knight Lancers of House Peltasti have gone for a charge order, threatening both the Warhound and the Acastus Knight.
Legio Noctilus turn 1 strategy phase. We left most of the Titans without orders to try and maintain flexibility. We've got a lot of turning to do. Tried a first fire order on the Acastus Knight. Unfortunately, it failed.
Turn 1 movement phase, priority to Legio Policiates. The banner of Knight Lancers from House Peltasti moved in to attack the Acastus Knight dealing 6 points of damage and nearly destroying it in the first turn of the game.
Turn 1, first activation for Legio Noctilus. In the movement phase, the Warhound Chieftain just moved forward out of the base and pivoted to try and bring its guns to bear on the back of those Cerastus Knights. I very much doubt it will be able to save the Acastus from dying, but it might be able to exact from some revenge. We'll see.
Next activation for Legio Policiates, the Reaver Titan Heliopolis pushes its reactor, taking 2 points of reactor heat, but moving 9 inches towards the enemy engines in the centre of the board.
Next activation for Legio Noctilus, the Reaver Titan Scourge pushed its reactor to gain an extra turn, unfortunately getting 2 points of reactor heat. However, it managed to bring its guns to bear through that gap in the rocks, hopefully being able to shoot at the enemy Reaver Titans in the coming turn.
Next activation, Legio Policiates, the Reaver Titan Scorpius advances next to the Princeps Honoris, not pushing its reactor, but moving alongside, forming a phalanx to hopefully move on Noctilus.
Next activation for Legio Noctilus, the Reaver Titan Typhoon turned twice and reversed 3 inches just to get itself away from the rapidly encroaching enemy Reaver Titans.
Final activation for Legio Policiates, the Reaver Titan Ballista Magni moved up towards the runway, bringing its volcano cannons to bear on the enemy Titans.
Final activation for Legio Noctilus, the Warhound Cavalier reversed and backpedaled away from the enemy Reavers that are looking very threatening. It's left itself as a little bit of a blocker. Hopefully the Reavers won't be able to get past it without destroying it, making them choose between what they want to do next turn.
Turn 1 damage control phase, priority Legio Policiates. Both the Legio Policiates Reaver Titan Heliopolis and Noctilus Titan Scourge reduce their reactors back to the green in this phase.
Turn 1 priority combat phase, Legio Noctilus managed to seize the initiative for a turn with their Warlord trait, Dominant Strategist, using it to activate the Acastus before the Cerastus finally finished it, being only 1 point of damage remaining. It fired every weapon it had at the Cerastus. Despite some really good saves, it managed to drop one Cerastus and damage the other one before it inevitably gets destroyed later in the phase. Pretty good result.
Turn 1 combat phase, activation to Legio Policiates. The Reaver Titan Scorpius opens fire on the Warhound Titan, forcing it to push its reactor, keeping the Machine Spirit at bay but taking a point of heat. However, its weapons only deal 2 points of shield damage to the Warhound Titan.
Next activation for Legio Noctilus, the Warhound Cavalier that just took damage fired back at one of the enemy Reavers approaching. The Vulcan Megabolter and the Blast Gun did a grand total of 1 point of damage to the shields and forced the Princeps to overcharge the reactor, taking 1 point of reactor heat.
Combat phase activation, Legio Policiates. The Reaver Titan Heliopolis pushes its reactor, taking a point of heat, to use the Shield Bane trait on the Turbo Laser, bringing down the Warhound Titan's shields. It then opened up with its Melter Cannon, dealing a critical damage to its head.
Next activation, Legio Noctilus, the Warhound Chieftain fired at the enemy Cerastus. Only the Blast Gun could see. 2 shots, 1 scattered, luckily not onto the friendly Cerastus. It did enough damage to take it down to its last point of structure, but unfortunately not killing it.
Turn 1 combat phase, Policiates activation. The Cerastus banner attacked the Acastus banner, dealing only a single point, leaving it barely standing.
Next activation for Legio Noctilus, the Reaver Titan Typhoon activated, doing something slightly tricky. It fired its Apocalypse missile launchers using the Blind Missiles barrage, where I can place a line of sight blocker anywhere on the board within range. It fired right in front of the enemy Reaver Titan with the double Volcano Cannon waiting to shoot, hopefully blocking those shots for this turn. It then fired its Gatling Blaster at the Reaver Titan Heliopolis, collapsing its shields with a run of good luck. However, the good luck ran out there, and its Volcano Cannon caused it to take 2 points of reactor heat, and then the shot missed anyway.
Legio Policiates, final activation for the combat phase. The Reaver Titan Ballistae Magna, obscured by the smoke by the tricksy traitors, was not able to fire on anything at all, electing not to fire its Carapace Warp Missile for fear of wasting the precious munition.
Final activation for Legio Noctilus turn 1, the Reaver Titan Scourge, trying to fire through the rocks at the enemy Reaver Titans, pushed its reactor on its Carapace weapon to get the draining trait. Unfortunately, gained a Machine Spirit Awoken. It managed to pass, but still gained a point of heat. It, however, missed those shots. The Melter Cannon and the other Turbo Laser Destructor all missed as well. So completely ineffective shooting phase to round out the turn there.
Turn 1 end phase, Legio Policiates priority. The Cerastus Knights, having advanced on the Acastus, took some heavy firepower after a rather devious stratagem employed by their traitor brethren. Thus, they're still locked in combat with the Acastus when they'd rather be going into the backs of those Titans. Meanwhile, the Reaver Titans advance under heavy fire towards the base of Legio Noctilus. Still early days in this battle, but it's proving a lot bloodier and a lot more difficult than Policiates were perhaps expecting. Turn 2 strategy phase, priority again to Legio Policiates, keeping up the initiative. Only one order was passed, which was the Reaver Titan Heliopolis, successfully passing a charge roll in order to engage the Warhound Titan in combat in the coming turn.
Turn 2 Legion Noctilus strategy phase. Some tough choices this round, trying to strike a balance between things like first fire and maintaining flexibility. In the end, we went for the Acastus past the first fire order, partly to bump its ballistic skill up, but also hopefully to see if it can survive. The Reaver Titan Typhoon passed the first fire order to try and bring down the shields or hull of the enemy Reavers. And finally, the Warhound Titan, staring down the enemy Reaver Titan, has bravely passed the first fire order to see if it can bring its guns to bear rather than run away in the phase later. Enacting their stratagem in the end of the strategy phase, Noctilus pointed all their base defences at the enemy Reaver Scorpius. 5 shots went out, good amount of hits, and actually managed to drop 2 Void Shields, leaving it with a few left, but some decent amount of damage for base defences.
Turn 2, priority to Legio Policiates. With his blood up, the Princeps of Heliopolis charges full speed, pushing his reactor into the red, taking 2 points of heat, into combat with the Warhound Titan. Targeting the already damaged head of the struggling engine with its chain fist does 2 points of direct damage and 1 critical, pushing it to the final step of critical damage to its head. We might have an engine kill this turn, although it cost Heliopolis dearly.
Legio Noctilus turn 2 activation in the movement phase. Cavalier activated his first fire, fearing that he is not long for this world, targeted the chest of the enemy Reaver that just charged him. He has quite a few negatives to shooting with his Princeps and a Moderati wounded with the critical damage to his head. But despite that, with the Vulcan Mega Bolter, clearly you can't miss at that closer range. Got 3 rapids, 8 hits, and managed to do a single direct hit to the chests of the enemy Reaver. Not too bad.
Legio Policiates, movement phase activation. The Reaver Titan, Scorpius, advances behind its Princeps Sonorus in order to join the melee in the centre of the board.
Legio Noctilus next activation, the Princeps in the Reaver Titan Typhoon, activated its first fire, targeted the enemy Reaver right in front of it, danger close with its Volcano Cannon, rolled the draining trait, didn't gain any heat luckily, but unluckily scattered 9 inches into nowhere and did absolutely no damage.
Turn 2 movement activation to Legio Policiates. The Reaver Titan Ballistae Magni, taking advantage of its Maniple trait, moved 6 inches sideways to avoid arcs of the Reaver Titan in the rocks and get a better line potentially on the Reavers in the coming next turns.
Legio Noctilus next activation, the Acastus activated its first fire, firing the twin Magna las cannons danger close. If a single one of these had scattered back onto him, he probably would have died and killed himself. Luckily, the one that did miss scattered off into the distance, landed 3 hits, which was enough to kill the last Lancer, leaving him free to target things elsewhere on the board. Final activations in the movement phase for Legio Noctilus. The Reaver Titan Scourge pushed forward into the rocky outcrop to try and get range and firing arcs on the enemy Reaver Titans advancing. The Warhound Titan on the left flank was going to about face and start to try and outflank. Unfortunately, on his he pushed his reactor to try and get more turns, rolled a command, Awaken Machine Spirit, failed the command check, and rolled a 2, which meant he had to immediately stop and do a repair roll. Would have been great, but he is completely undamaged, so he is sitting there probably just having a cup of tea for the next turn.
Turn 2, damage control phase, priority to Legio Policiates. The Reaver Titan Heliopolis, having pushed its reactor into the red, gained the thankful blessings of the Omnissiah and managed to restore it by 3 points. Although its shields aren't reignited at this close range, it doesn't matter, and that potential overheat could have cost it dearly in the later rounds. So not a bad result at all.
Damage control phase turn 2 Legio Noctilus. The 2 Reaver Titans both managed to vent plasma back into the green. More importantly, the incredibly damaged Warhound facing down the enemy Reaver managed to roll 2 6s and repaired 2 points of critical damage to his head. Probably still not enough to survive the incoming shooting, but he's acting as a bit of a meat shield, so that's good news for us.
Turn 2, combat phase, priority to Legio Policiates. Continuing its assault on the Warhound Titan, Heliopolis deals damage to its head of the stricken Warhound, reducing it back to the red on the critical track, and then reaching out with its melter cannon, blows it to smithereens at point-blank range, meaning the engine toppled sideways into nothing. Engine kill for Policiates.
Turn 2 combat activation for Legio Noctilus. The Princeps Senuris in Typhoon targets the enemy Princeps Senuris that just destroyed a Warhound Titan, unleashing all his weapons at the targeted shots at the body. This proved pretty successful with the Apocalypse Missile Launcher doing a couple of points of direct damage and the Gatling Blaster with its Ordnance trait chipping away a lot of damage and taking the damage track all the way to the end of the damage track, doing a lot of damage to the body. The Volcano Cannon couldn't keep up and missed and then scattered off into the distance, doing no damage.
Turn 2 activation to Legio Policiates. The Reaver Titan Scorpius opened fire with its Vulcan Megabola, forcing the enemy Reaver to boost its shields, taking no heat in the process but still losing 2 shield points in the process.
Next activation for Legio Noctilus in the combat phase, the Acasus Knight wheeled round and targeted the enemy Princeps Senuris in the Reaver. It targeted the body with its Ironstorm missile pod, managing to force it onto the first critical on the critical table. It then targeted with the Magna las cannons without a called shot, hitting the legs and doing 3 points of damage, but it's still fully mobile, which is worrying.
Legio Policiates combat phase activation. The Reaver Titan Ballistae Magni, unable to risk its double volcano cannons, instead chooses to fire its Carapace Warp missile at the enemy Reaver Titan. Bypassing its shield, it strikes it straight in the body, dealing a point of critical damage and causing a reactor leak in the enemy engine.
Last combat activations for turn 2 for Legio Noctilus. The Warhound at the back of the board just sat looking off the board, having failed its command check earlier for a Machine Spirit Awaken. The last Reaver Titan Scourge targeted the second Reaver Titan coming up the runway. It overcharged both its laser destructors to gain Shield Bane twice. However, due to some bad dice rolls, it gained 2 points of heat, only managed to strip 1 point of shields from all its firing, including the Melter Cannon. Not the best, but at least it's in a strong firing position for next turn. End phase, round 2. Both Princeps Senuris took a reactor leak, advanced in the reactor by 1, having both taken critical damage in the combat phase. So both of them running the reactors a little bit hot. Overall, it's looking quite balanced. The Policiates Reavers are bearing down on the central part of the map, aiming for their objective. Noctilus really need priority next turn to get out of the way and do some counterfire. But if Policiates get priority next turn, it looks like we'll be receiving yet more charges. Could be a big turn for the game. Strategy phase, turn 3, Legio Noctilus priority. Really good news, we managed to win the roll-off for the priority roll this turn, meaning we can try and get out of the way of the oncoming Policiates. Fairly light on the orders this turn. The Acasus Knight issued a first fire order to bump up its ballistic skill and try and whittle down the enemy Titans. The Reaver Titan Scourge on the Rocky Outcrop also issued a first fire order to try again to put as much damage down on the incoming Reavers as possible. The stratagems phase, the defensive fire targeted the Reaver Titan with 1 Void Shield left, however only hit once, and the Policiates saved it.
Turn 3 strategy phase, Legio Policiates. The Reaver Titan Heliopolis, under heavy fire from the Traitor Titans, enacts the repair order, healing its reactor by 2 points of damage. However, it's still able to move, but it cannot be activated in the combat phase. However, it's going to move on the centre of that board. In the meantime, the two other Reavers of its mana pool, Scorpius and Ballistae Magni, both enact the split fire order, allowing them to divide their firepower between the ground assets and the enemy titans in the oncoming turns. Polysiates enacted both its stratagems this phase, dealing the static range stratagem, deploying it into the centre of the board, knocking out the shields of the enemy Princeps Sonorus Titan. However, this also affected the shields of the Reaver Titan Scorpius, reducing its shields by a point. In the same phase, it fired its Quake. The Legio fired its Quake cannons for the first time, attempting to strike the Acastus at the edge of the board, missing sadly, though this stratagem can still be used next turn.
Turn 3 movement phase, Legio Polysiates priority, starting with the Princeps Sonorus, who has rotated and then backpedaled 3 inches just to try and get away from those two really nasty, scary looking Reaver Titans with chain fists. Hopefully the guns will be in range and in arc to do some damage this turn, but it's mostly just a sort of keeping himself out of trouble turn for the moment.
Legio Polysiates, movement activation. The Reaver Titan Heliopolis, under its repair orders, still moves forward to the centre and the enemy base, hoping it can survive some retribution firepower, putting it in a stronger position for the rest of the game.
Next movement activation for Legio Noctilus. Scourge up on the rocks activated its first fire, targeting with the melter cannon. It targeted the now shieldless Reaver in front of it. It, however, completely missed, the blast scattering away, not hitting anything.
Legio Polysiates, movement phase activation. The Reaver Titan, Scorpius, taking full advantage of its increased manoeuvrability, thanks to the Corsair mana pool, sidesteps 6 inches to the side, allowing it to both threaten the Reaver on the rocks and also keep its weapons in arc of the shieldless Princeps Sonorus in front of it.
Legio Noctilus, next activation of the movement phase, the Acastus triggered its first fire, targeting the enemy Princeps Sonorus Reaver that is charged into the middle of the base. 4 dice, 2 hits, 2 scattered with no effect. The hits managed to hit the leg, and with some really good dice rolling, managed to take it all the way to the last critical. So the enemy Reaver is really restricted in its movement. It is, however, still in the objective zone, so it just needs to sit there to the end of the game to score the points. We'll see what happens later.
Turn 3, movement phase, activation to Legio Polysiates. The Reaver Titan, Ballistae Magni, advances somewhat, and then sidesteps to keep its weapons trained on the shieldless Reaver Titan in front of it. While being able to move, it crushes the battlefield asset to its side under its massive bulk.
Final activation in the movement phase for Legio Noctilus. The Warhound Chieftain finally wakes up, about faces and sidewalks just to bring its guns to bear on the approaching enemy Reavers, giving itself some flexibility in what it wants to do. Damage control phase, turn 3 for Legio Noctilus. The Reaver Titan Scourge managed to vent its plasma, going back to green. Crucially, however, the Princeps Sonorus Typhoon rolled really well, but no 6s, so didn't manage to reignite its void, so it's still completely open. It did, however, manage to repair its critical damage to its chest and bring itself back to green reactor. However, it is down on its voids.
Damage control phase for Legio Polysiates. In a potentially crucial phase for the Loyalist Legio, the Princeps Sonorus Reaver Titan Heliopolis managed to restore its void shields. Although it's only restored 1 point, it might keep it alive for this turn. Additionally, the second Reaver Titan, Scorpius, managed to restore its void shields as well. Pretty good, pretty good.
Turn 3 combat phase, Legio Noctilus activation. The Acastus draws a bead on the enemy Princeps, trying to wipe it off the board. It rolls some good hits with its Magnalas cannons, dropping the shields previously with its Ironstorm missile pod. It, however, hit the Reaver Chain Fist, blowing it off the Titan, so it's now inactive. However, the Reaver's still standing, with critical damage all over.
Turn 3 combat phase activation to Legio Polysiates. The Reaver Titan Scorpius opens fire with its carapace-mounted Vulcan Megabolter on the Reaver Titan on the ridge, scoring 7 hits against the Titan and hoping to bring its shields down. The Princeps were slightly baffled when the enemy Reaver Titan saved every single one of them, not losing a single point of shield in the process, nor taking reactor heat after their enemy Princeps boosted their shields. However, Under split fire orders, it was able to open fire with its melter cannon, dealing 4 points of damage and a critical to the head of the Princeps Sonorus in front of it.
Legio Noctilus's next activation in the combat phase is a really important one. The Princeps Sonorus targeted the enemy Princeps right in front of him, needing to bring him down before he scored more points or could act in the next turn. Targeted him with the Apocalypse Missile Launcher and the Gatling Blaster, aiming for the chest, bringing him to catastrophic damage with the Gatling Blaster with a final shot. However, the enemy Princeps managed to use his Warlord trait to roll higher than the catastrophic damage dice rolled. I rolled a 9, the Noctilus rolled a 9. Policiates beat it with a 10, shrugging off the catastrophic damage. This meant that the Princeps Sonorus had to use his Volcano Cannon, which was draining and could potentially damage himself. Luckily, got 2 hits, rolled on the body location, did more catastrophic damage, and this one couldn't be shrugged off. The enemy Reaver then rolled the lay low result, stumbling backwards towards the centre of the battlefield and exploding there to no harm. That was a really good shooting phase for Legio Noctilus. A lot could have gone wrong, and that basically came down to a roll of the dice, which happened to come out in our favour.
Final activation for Legio Policiates in the combat phase. The Reaver Titan, Ballistine Magnite, opens fire with both its Volcano Cannons at the Princeps Sonorus, striking it twice in the head, taking it to the final point of critical damage. However, it isn't quite enough to kill the engine, with the final shot scattering off into the bunker behind, dealing no damage.
Final activations for Legio Noctilus in the combat phase. The Warhound at the back of the board tried to target the closest Reaver Titan of Policiates. However, it was out of range due to the atmospheric rules we have in effect, limiting range to a dice roll plus scale. The Reaver Titan Scourge then targeted down into the side of the enemy Reaver. Between its laser blaster and the carapace-mounted laser blaster, it managed to strip its points of voids left. It then fired with its melter cannon, hitting the enemy in its melter cannon and disabling the weapon. Not too bad.
Turn 3 end phase. It's been a brutal and bloody turn for both Legios. Policiates lost its Princeps Sonorus, who attempted to breach into the fortress and was driven down by the firepower of Noctilus. However, there are 2 engines, both doing fairly well, advancing into the centre as well. It's still all to play for. With shields down, engines burning, there's a lot to go into the next turns as we go towards the end of the game.
Turn 4 strategy phase. Legio Noctilus priority, winning the roll-off. Legio Noctilus chose to go first. They issued an emergency repair order on the Princeps Sonorus in Typhoon, who rolled 4 dice thanks to their Elite Magos trait, managed to roll 2 1s and 2 2s, leading to absolutely no repairs. So it's still completely voidless and has taken critical damage to the head. I don't think it's long for this world, unfortunately. We then enacted the base defense fire stratagem, which happens at the end of every strategy phase, fired at the Policiates Reaver at the back of the board and stripped 1 void shield, which isn't too bad.
Turn 4 strategy phase for Legio Policiates. Wanting to keep the tactical flexibility up, Legio Policiates elected to give no specialised orders to either of its Reaver Titans, both of which will continue their advance into the base. However, they enacted the Quake Cannon shell stratagem again, launching a shell towards the Acastus in the rear, finally destroying it with a ferocious barrage. The bunker near it was undamaged, however.
Turn 4 movement phase, Legio Noctilus priority. First to activate was the Princeps Sonorus in Typhoon, who moved forward and turned, just desperately trying to gain some cover away from the enemy Reavers. Moved into the centre of the board also to block movement and hopefully keep them away from the objective, the centre of the board.
Turn 4 movement phase for Legio Policiates. Under the inspiration of the now dead Princeps Sonorus, the Reaver Titan Scorpius advances, pushing its reactor and taking 2 points of heat. However, it is moved within the potential shield range of the Princeps Sonorus, lining up for a potential killing blow in the next turn.
Next activation for Noctilus. Not having done a lot this game, the Warhound Chieftain pushes its reactor, manages to stay cool, and rushes down the board to get in the side arc of the enemy Reaver that is just closed in on the Princeps Sonorus, trying to see if he can save him.
Movement phase, Legio Policiates activation. The Reaver Titan Ballistae Magni advances, pushing its reactor and taking a point of heat. However, it's moved closer to the base with the objective in mind.
Final activation for Legio Noctilus in the movement phase. The Reaver Titan Scourge continues its path through the rocks, just to bring its guns down to bear on the side of that Policiates Reaver Titan coming in. It's got some good shots, but it might run out of arc next turn, so we don't have long to try and bring it down. It'll all be down to the dice.
Damage control phase for the Legio Policiates. The Reaver Titan Ballistae Magni was able to restore its shields to full, giving it a strong position for the coming turns as it advances into the base. Crucially, however, the Reaver Titan Scorpius was able to repair both its melter cannon and restore its void shields, putting it in a better position for the coming fight, particularly with that Warhound lurking nearby.
Damage control phase turn 4 Legio Noctilus priority. Started with the Reaver Titan on the ridge, Scourge just cooling his reactor back into the green, and everything else is all in the green. More importantly, the Princeps Sinuris managed to restore 1 crit to its head, so it's on 2 at the moment. Managed to cool his reactor for potentially a volcano shot this turn. He is, however, still voidless, and with that enemy Reaver right next to him, it's not looking good, but we'll see what happens. Turn 4, combat phase, Legio Noctilus priority. The Princeps Sinuris in Typhoon trained all its weapons on the Reaver Titan right next to it in a desperate attempt to bring it down. Targeted with the Apocalypse Missile Launcher and the Gatling Blaster, however, almost every single shot missed, doing a mere 2 points of damage to the body. The Volcano Cannon then fired and scattered off into the distance, doing no damage. Clearly, they are worried and a little bit spooked by the Reaver Titan right next to them, and that affected their aim.
Legio Policiates activation in the combat phase. Having moved into combat with the enemy Reaver Titan led by the Princeps Sonorus, the Reaver Titan Scorpius decapitates its foe in a single blow, toppling the Reaver backwards into the base of Legio Noctilus. Pretty successful round of combat for Policiates.
Next activation for Legio Noctilus is the Warhound Titan, trying desperately to avenge the Princeps Sinuris. It overcharged its reactor to fire the turbo laser on draining, getting 2 points of heat in the process, missing once, and Policiates saved the shield save anyway. The plasma blast gun then had to waste its shots, taking down the final void shield. So the enemy Reaver is voidless, but there are no more guns for me to bring to bear on it, so it escapes for another turn.
Legio Policiates combat phase activation, electing not to fire its volcano cannons at the Warhound Titan. The Reaver Titan Ballistae Magni instead fired at the bunker that was behind the Warhound Titan, obliterating it in a salvo of volcanic fury.
Final activation for Legio Noctilus. The Reaver Titan Scourge targeted the Reaver Titan below it, pouring all of its turbo laser fire into the enemy voids. Using Shield Bane, it gained 2 points of heat. Amazingly, it only managed to strip 2 void shields along with the melter cannon. So the enemy Reaver Titan below it is still mostly shielded and impervious to damage for the coming phase. Turn 4 end phase. It's been another bloody turn with Titans dying all over the place. Noctilus are still in the game, hoping to bring down another Titan in the last turn, next turn. Policiates have to push forward and claim the centre of the board, but making good work in destroying the ground assets as well. It all comes down to this last turn, and it's all to play for as we go into turn 5.
Turn 5 strategy phase, priority to Legio Policiates. In the final turn of the game, it's all to play for. Policiates elects not to take any orders this phase in order to keep up flexibility as it continues its advance to the centre of the board. Meanwhile, off-map artillery continues its bombardment, harmlessly scattering into a network of buildings in the distance and doing no damage to the emplacements surrounding the base.
Turn 5 Legio Noctilus strategy phase. Again, no orders were issued, just to keep ourselves flexible and try and move around the battlefield. It's going to be a turn of movement, I feel. The defensive artillery, defensive emplacements down to 3 bunkers, managed to fire and strip a single void shield off the double volcano cannon Policiates Reaver. Not too bad.
Continuing their advance deep within the base, the Legio Policiates Riva Scorpius advances further in. However, the dastardly Legio Noctilus unleashes thermal mines, dealing critical damage to its legs, potentially endangering it for this crucial final phase of the game. Could Noctilus secure a late kill? It's all to play for still.
First activation, turn 5 of the movement phase for Noctilus. The Warhound Titan has just run straight forward and brought itself in right behind the enemy Reaver. We're going to try everything to just bring it down, perhaps targeting its already damaged legs. It's a bit of a do or die, but hopefully we can deny holding the centre ground to Policiates.
Turn 5, movement activation, final activation for Legio Policiates. The Reaver Titan Ballistae Magni, taking the example of its brethren, moves in not only to secure the base, but also to potentially endanger the Warhound Titan that has moved boldly to engage its rival. Potentially, we could see a very, very interesting combat phase in this final turn of the game.
Final activation of turn 5 for Legio Noctilus. The Reaver Titan Scourge moves down off the rocky outcrop to try and get a side shot on the enemy Reaver with the Melt Cannon and Chain Fist. It has to knock the Titan out this turn, otherwise Policiates are going to be securing the centre of the base.
Damage control phase for Legio Policiates. The Reaver Titan Scorpius, which has taken such damage to its legs that could potentially endanger it, manages to repair the single critical damage to its legs, which might save it for this phase, though it is still at high risk. Additionally, the Reaver Titan, behind it, Ballistae Magni, that had so pushed its reactor to get in a better position, manages to vent 2 of those points, putting it in a safer zone for the coming phase.
Damage control phase Legio Noctilus. There wasn't too much to repair. Both the Reaver and the Warhound vented plasma and are back in the green, ready for the coming combat phase.
Turn 5 combat phase, activation to Legio Policiates. The Reaver Titan Scorpius, taking advantage of Policiates' brutal war gear upgrade, Armour Spikes, engages the Warhound behind it, managing to roll 6 for the amount of damage it can do with a smash attack. This reduces the Warhound to enough points to destroy it. However, that engine fires off wildly into the rear of Scorpius, dealing serious damage to its legs, endangering it to the coming activation of the Reaver Titan in front of it.
Turn 5, only activation for Legio Noctilus is the Reaver Titan Scourge. It's got a side arc on a shieldless Titan of Policiates, fires every single weapon it has as a cool shot to the legs to try and take it out. However, it misses with almost every single shot, managing to do 1 critical hit to the legs and another to the body with a missed shot. It isn't enough to bring it down, unfortunately. However, it's managed to take it into critical damage, and that might help with our secondary objective. We'll have to find out.
Final activation for Legio Policiates in the combat phase. The Reaver Titan, Ballistae Magni, attempted to shoot at the bunker in the distance to secure a final victory point, however missed with its volcano cannon, giving itself a point of heat and putting its reactor close to orange in this crucial final turn. Turn 5 end phase. This has been an exceptionally close game. In that final end phase, the Reaver Titan Scorpius suffers a reactor leak, taking 3 points of damage to its body. It could have gone horribly wrong for Policiates at the very last moment, but thankfully the Reaver Titan just about survived. With the game being so as close as it is, we're going to total up the scores and get back to you for what has been an exceptionally bloody game between the 2 Legios. So, that was it. What a game.
Yeah. Wow.
Our last game was not as brutal as that.
No.
No engine kills for the last game, but this game saw engines after engines dying. It was brutal.
That was the polar opposite of the last game.
Yeah.
No sneaking this one. It was just a straight up fist fight.
Yeah. But what I really enjoyed about that is how close it was. There were so many times that you just couldn't call it.
Yeah.
And it came right to the wire with the victory points.
Yeah.
Noctilus just did very well in that game.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. We managed to kill a Reaver, the Princeps Senuris no less. We managed to kill some Knights. We tried to keep the rest away. We damaged all the other Knights. We were quite good on the manoeuvring. So they scored 14 in total for destroying the Knights and the bonus for damaging the other Titans. Policiates, however.
Oh. So, Wasn't quite enough, unfortunately.
Yes.
The Loyalist advance was successful, although under very heavy firepower. Miracle that some of those engines survived the damage they took.
The Minigosses are going to be busy on both sides.
Oh, yes, yes. Those 2 engines, managing to secure the centre of the board and the 2 bunkers destroyed, secured Policiati's 18 victory points, just about winning the game.
Yeah.
So, next game is a lot to play for.
There is, yeah.
However, in this game, we both brought engines back. So,
Yes.
you've brought back your Princeps.
Yes, mostly because he was pretty good. I wish his repair rolls were better.
Yeah.
There were 2 sets of repair rolls that just really fluffed on this guy. But despite that, he did quite a lot of damage.
Yeah.
He stared down your enemy reavers quite a lot. His Gatling Blaster is great. I might have to get a second one.
Yes,
the
Gatling Blasters
the
are
ordnance
excellent.
trait on them, targeted shots, 6 dice, really decent. He did a lot of work. He's just solid. Unfortunately, he then took a chain fist to the face, but that's how it happens sometimes.
Yes.
And yours is?
The Titan that gave him the chains fist to the face. Scorpius. I wasn't playing for engine kills, and Policiati's goal wasn't that, but they were in the way.
Yes. Fair
So,
enough.
I mean, I don't usually play combat Legios, and Scorpius was a bit of a risk. In fact, this Legio was a bit of a risk,
Yeah.
but that really paid off.
They're tough to pull off. I think I was saying to you when we were playing it, it's the most melee combat I've seen
Yes.
outside of Knights ever.
Yes, yeah.
Just because it was such a tight map.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I had to choose between running away faster or shooting.
Yep.
Took the chance, and you take the chance to get chain fists to the face. But it seemed to
So,
work.
yeah, the Chain Fist and the Armour Spikes, which is a frankly incredible upgrade, along with the Blind Barrage that yours did.
Yeah, that was the armor spikes were really scary. They're worth noting. You rolled d6 for the damage dice. You rolled 6 twice, so those are covered in lots of little bits of Titan.
Yeah, yeah.
They're-
Yeah.
but very good, very
yes,
good.
Yes.
Thematic as well. I really like the blind barrage. The smoke missiles on this guy, stopping your volcano cannons from firing for a whole turn. Really thematic war gear that was used thematically for Lothar Legio. So I think that's starting to come out, which is really nice.
So, yeah, that was a really exciting, really great game, and I hope you really enjoyed watching it. You can follow our progress as we move to our next game in our linked campaign.
Yes,
Which is 2,000 points.
2,000.
With Allied Legios, bigger Titans, bigger battles, bigger everything, more chain fists.
Yes, some Allied Legios for both of us, I think.
So it's
2K.
as we build up towards that game, you can see our progress on our social media.
Yep.
I'm at jharatac Paints on Instagram, and
Yes.
you are.
I'm pack_paint, so they should be there and there. I've done my job right, flashing up.
You can also follow the channel at the 30k channel, and please subscribe to us. There's a lot of incredible content, both in the universe of Adeptus Titanicus and in the Horus Heresy.
Yes.
So thank you for watching, and we'll see you very soon. Goodbye.